Where do you go to make the most money as an instructional designer? That's what we're talking about today. My name is Dr. Ray, otherwise known as Ramey, and we're talking about what instructional designers are making the most. Who's making the most money? Where do you want to go if you're trying to make the most as an ID? A lot of people assume that corporate ID pays the highest, but that's not really true. And I'm going to talk about that. Because a lot of people wonder about that. They think like, assume, oh yeah, you go to corporate ID is kind of everything, and that's not really the truth. And so we're going to investigate that a little bit today. So first of all, up on the screen here, I have instructional designer in the United States average base salary. This is from Indeed.com. Whenever I look at Indeed and all these sites, their salaries aren't always 100% accurate. Like, let's give or take like 10 to 15% from these. Because the salaries I see of the average ID in the United States is more like around $79,000 to $80,000. But we have this base salary of $70,000, which is about what I see for most starting IDs going into corporate. It's about the average that I see. But we're not really talking about the average or starting salary. We're talking about where do you make the most money? And that's really at every level, like the average salary for IDs. And then as you get into the senior levels, like where can you pull in the big bucks, right? What company? So what I've done is I started to look at like some average employee salaries across some industries. So start to look at like how much are employees making at some of like the bigger companies where I believe instructional designers make the most money, which are FANG. So that's like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. So those companies in the corporate space are the ones paying the most money. And then where I know that there's other higher paid salaries are government instructional design, which a lot of people are surprised to hear that. But yes, government pays very good salaries, as you'll see here. And the other sector of that is management consulting, which is basically does government contracting. And they're kind of an in-between between corporate and government. And we're going to take a look at some of their salaries too and talk about like where's the average highest salaries in instructional design. And then I'm going to talk about where the ultimate highest are. Like if you're looking for the Ferrari and Lambo and stuff, where you want to work. All right. So the first thing I have pulled up here is Indeed, and we've got Amazon. So average instructional designer at Amazon makes around $82,000, low end in the 40s, which seems way off, and high end 130, which seems about right. So the average instructional designer is probably at Amazon making in the $80,000. So we see like the average at Amazon, like this $80,000 up to like $130,000. Before you start to get into like senior levels at Amazon, it can make a lot more money. And I'll get there, talk about that. So that's Amazon. We pulled up average at Google. Not much different than Amazon. The low is still really low, which seems odd. But then we have the average is $108,000, high of $164,000. Now you notice that like this average is $20,000 more at Google. But as I said, like in all these websites that you look at, we're never pulling all instructional designers in the world. Even if they pulled 500 IDs, we still don't have really the average because there's some big variance in there. As you see, like the difference between 54 and 164 is ginormous. But the average is 108. So we're still in that ballpark of like a pretty good average. So Amazon, we had 81. Google average for IDs is about 108. So those are some pretty good average salaries, right? But we're talking top of corporate. We're talking, these are the top companies that pay the most. Right? Like this is FANG. Like this is where you go for the big salary. So these are the higher end of corporate. All right. Next, we get into the in-between corporate and government, which is the government consulting. So this is the contractors. These are the people who go out and get the corporate contracts. They work at a consulting firm like Booz Allen, Accenture, McKinsey, any of the big consulting firms, KPMG, whatever it is, consulting firm. All the defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop, and so on. These are the people that work for the government, but you get a job at their company. So you're technically a private employee working for the government. So it's like a cross between corporate and government. Let's check out there. So I just pulled up one company, Booz Allen. Now, this is where I used to work. You can see the average salary is 102, between 82 and 126. So very comparable, actually higher than Amazon, but still in the same ballpark as Amazon, Google, and Now we're in government consulting, but we can pull up like McKinsey and all those places. They're going to have the same type of thing. So next, we have federal instructional designers. How much are government instructional designers making? What's the average? Lo and behold, the average instructional designer in the federal is actually the highest, 115. Now, that is quite interesting. It's actually the highest number I pulled up here. However, having said that, I did talk about that variance. I'd assume that all three of these, FANG, contractors, government, are all paying around the same. Average IDs are all making around the same amount. Even though these numbers vary by $15,000, $20,000, remember, none of these websites are perfect. So we're just kind of trying to look at averages, and I'm also using like some external data here in that I have students, and I mean alumni at all these different companies, so I kind of know what their starting salaries are. I know they email me and tell me what, hey, I've been at Amazon for 5 years, blah, blah, blah. We talk about salaries, we talk about all kinds of stuff, trends in the field, all that good stuff. So I've got some like external data in the back of my mind that I'm also using to kind of fuel this discussion. But as you can see, like we go through Amazon, Google, consulting, contracting, and federal, and we're pretty much getting the highest salaries. I mean, good salaries, and all pretty much the same. Like, you're not really getting worse salaries at government than you are at Google for an instructional designer. All right, so what does that tell me? And then I want to get to who's being paid the most money. Like, where do you go for the Lambo? All right, so what does that tell me? First of all, it tells me that corporate ID is not paying the most money at all for instructional design. There are other fields out there that are paying just as much money. The government contractors are being paid just as much as and remember, this is the top corporate. We're talking Google and Amazon. We're not talking like general place. And you know, I get different numbers. Like if I Google search, you know, instructional designers salaries at, just to kind of show you, at Google, you're going to see like all kinds of different numbers, like 84 to 130, 51 to 120, but you're going to see like not too much variation across here. We'll go to ZipRecruiter, see what they say. Google instructional designer salary. Now they're saying the average is 80, closer to the Amazon. As I said, like these are all paying around the same amount of money. And you can see the top here is 130, whereas this one showed Google the average is 108. So you can see why there's that variation as you search across the web. But anyway, what you're seeing here is that corporate is not the highest. It's just that it's in the highest bracket, but there are other instructional designers making just as much money. So it's not like the be-all, end-all of instructional design. And the only reason I bring that up is because I see that discussion on LinkedIn, Facebook, Reddit, that like corporate's kind of like where you go to make the money. And that's not necessarily always true. There are these other places that pay just as much. And in some cases, maybe have better benefits and stuff. So work-life balance and stuff. So there's all that kind of stuff that goes into it too. But I want to bring that up because I think it's very important for someone new to IDs, like thinks like they have to go into corporate, and that's not the case. Like there is the federal government. There are these other places. Now the salaries in higher ed are going to be lower, trending lower than these averages, and salaries in K-12 are going to be way lower than these averages. But I even want to talk about that. So then when we start to talk about, well, what if I want to make the six-figure salaries? Like, where do I go? Yeah, there are these places, but there are other places that instructional designers can go for six-figure salaries. I can tell you that, like, all the senior people at universities, like who are in charge of, like, their LMS, in charge of their online learning and stuff, are making, like, 130 to, like, 170 to even, like, $200,000, leading their instructional design team at a university. So like there are like some pretty big salaries at universities. And as we start to get in the senior levels of these companies, like Amazon and Google, you know, we're talking like many hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking people who get in comps so like $400,000 to like $800,000. So, but that's as you're no longer an instructional designer, you're now a manager, you're moving up the levels, right? But, you know, when you're working and making $500,000 at Google or Amazon, you're living where they are and very high cost of living. So where do you get the most money as an instructional designer? You know, and like federal, like you're never going to make $400,000. Like these salary increases are based on promotion and how much you rate your raises each year. You're never going to get that. And you also forget, like federal, it says 115 is the average, but you're not going to get like a $50,000 bonus like you might at Booz Allen, like you might at Google, like you might at Amazon. So these averages don't always take into account those bonuses either. So keep that in mind. It's something important that I should keep in mind. But what I want to get to is, what if you want the Lambo? You want the Ferrari. Like you want to make like $2 million a year. Can you do that as an instructional designer? So I want to say yes, you can, but I got to be strategic in how I say it. So you can't just be like an instructional designer, e-learning developer. You're not making $2 million a year. But what you can do as an instructional designer, there's two ways to do it. There are two ways to make that kind of money as like with an ID background, I should say, to be more clear. The first is have your own instructional design company. Okay, so yeah, you got like your own company, your own business owner. Second, and I guess there's three ways. Second, it would be getting really high up position, like outside of learning and development at Google, Amazon, one of those big companies. I mean, like really, really most competitive, highest. You're like 1% of the 1% at one of these companies trying to get in there. The other way is working for one of these consulting firms. So, and I think it's probably the easiest of the three by far. And why do I say that? So all these contractors, like the military contractors, the defense contractors, why can you make so much money at them? So here's why you can make so much money at them. Because as you move up in instructional design at a company like Booz Allen, where I used to work, what you start to do is you start to become a salesman. You transition from instructional designer to salesman. What does that mean? It means like, so a company, a defense contractor, what they do is they have to, like the government says, like we have a $200 million contract to build like a plane or to do whatever, teach people how to fly this new plane. And you as a contractor at Booz Allen say, you know what, I'm going to write the contract for our company to win that proposal. So you become a contract writer, RFP writer. You're learning how to write proposals and bidding and presenting and playing politics to actually get them, becoming a salesman. When you win that contract, that a $2 million contract or a $10 million contract or a $200 million contract, guess what? You get a piece of the pie. Your bonus at the end of the year can be calculated based on how much money you brought into the company, which gives you the advantage of being able to make a ton of money. Now, I worked at Booz Allen. I was a defense contractor, and I worked with people I worked on projects where there were like 20 defense contracting companies all working together. We all talked. Now, at the low levels, you're not getting that bonus. You're not doing anything. And I have a funny story about me writing a proposal, winning, and not getting anything from it. But it was pretty much the same in that, like, your salary potential was almost unlimited. I saw people driving the Lambos and the Ferraris and having multiple of them and having houses in the Hamptons and houses in Hawaii and having salaries in the many millions of dollars a year in 2003. Yeah, 20 years ago they were making that much. There's an extensive amount of money to be made. If you want the top, you want to make the most amount of money, go into writing proposals as a defense contractor. Use your instructional design, because what you do as an ID is you write you work on the training proposals. The ones who a company like NASA needs somebody trained. They're going to train astronauts to do whatever. You write the proposal and win it. You know ID, you know the background. So yeah, that's it. And my funny story about it is that I won, it was like $2 or $3 million proposal. And all that I got from the person who was going to collect the bonus was literally an email that said 2 words, "Thank you." I was like, dude, you're getting like a 20 grand bonus or something off of what I just won. And I don't get anything. But yeah, so if you're interested in instructional design and you're considering where the top salaries are, the top salaries are in corporate at the top companies, government contractors, defense contractors, and federal government. It's not just corporate. And if you're looking at the cream of the crop, the best of the best salaries, It's at like the Lockheed Martin or the McKinsey or the Booz Allen or the Accenture where you can get writing proposals and going into basically instructional design sales is where you're going to get the most money by far. At least right now at this point in time, that's where I'm seeing people get the most money. All right, I'd love to hear more about ID stuff. I know people don't like posting their salaries, but go ahead and post your salary on this post. Or post salaries that you've heard of. You know, if you don't want to post your own because your name's attached to your account and all that stuff, I get it. But go ahead and post your own. And I'd love to I love to talk salary with my alumni, but I don't get to talk about it to random people all the time either. So I'd love to hear. All right, later, y'all.